The knowledge. Very good. እኔ ብዙውን ስለ ፓን አፍሪካኒዝም ስለማወራ በእንግሊዝኛ ለማውራት ይፈቀድልኝ። Today is Africa Day, and I think it's a very important day for us. Unfortunately, our country is not celebrating Africa Day. The only country that's celebrating Africa Day is Namibia. And the other country that's celebrating Africa Day is only Cuba. And this is the kind of importance we give to Africa. Although we are the founding fathers of Africa here under Emperor Haile Selassie, and the Africa Hall that you see in front of this building was designed and built as a gift to Africa by Ethiopia, the problem has been our focus on Africa has been very limited. And I think I congratulate my brother, Johannes, for being able to organize this for our young students, brothers, sisters, and children. And I see our scouts here. Scouting was stopped under the military government of the Derg, but now we have started it again. I'm the chief scout of Ethiopia. We have about 100,000 members now in every school. Cub scouts ranging from age like 6 to 8 to 10, and then of course we're giving training for professional training. But in talking about Pan-Africanism, Pan-Africanism was a concept that was developed in the United States, Europe, South Africa, and it emerged out of a concept called Ethiopianism. Pan-Africanism was a reaction to slavery, to slave trade, and to colonialism. Pan-Africanism was a reaction to bring the African people to the front of history. And of course, there are so many luminary intellectuals who have been working on Pan-Africanism. But the core idea was Ethiopianism. How did Ethiopia exist? By fighting against so many incursions by the Dervish, by the Mahadis, by the Ottoman Turks, by the Italians, on the scramble for Africa. So it was amazing for African children or for slaves who went to the United States, that we call today African Americans, to see the example of Ethiopia as a luminary example of freedom, as a luminary example of independence. While many countries in Latin America, in Asia and Africa celebrate their Independence Day, we celebrate a different day. We celebrate the victory of Adwa. We actually defeated the Italians, and I think this is very important. So the roots of Pan-Africanism come from Ethiopia's ability to defend itself against foreign invaders, that Ethiopia has never been colonized. And the moment the Italians tried to colonize it, the international community came to help us, and our patriots took the leading role in the freedom of the movement. But Ethiopianism is also a concept that is rooted in Ethiopian history, in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the teachings of the church. The church, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, is 15 centuries old today. And also, what you should know is the first mosque that was ever built in the world was built in Ethiopia, the Najashi Mosque in Tigray. And it's very important that we remind ourselves of this history. Ethiopia was not born yesterday. Ethiopia has a history of 5,000 years documented in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Of course, we say we have only 3,000 years of history, but what is 2,000 between friends? We cannot argue about that. But the point is, we have history, and I think that is the most important source of our Pan-Africanist movement. The other issue is the organization of African unity. After a lot of efforts by different groups, the Monrovia group, the Casablanca group, Emperor Haile Selassie brought them here together. He had the most competent ministers at that time. They were able to bring these two groups together to form the Organization of African Unity. The Africa Hall you see in front was built to celebrate African unity. So that's how we celebrate Africa. The African Union now has been transformed with an agenda to step. What is lacking is the energy of the citizens of Africa to participate in that process. If you see the United Nations Charter, it says, we the people of the United Nations. But when you see the African Union Charter, it says, we the heads of government and states of Africa. It doesn't represent the African people. And I think we have to transform that on this Africa Day. We have to demand for it. The power of youth and the voice of youth are now very important in this world. You've seen what they are doing with young people in Sudan, in Algeria, in Tunisia. They're transforming their countries from arbitrary, dogmatic rule into democratic societies, and hopefully the military won't hijack this process. But the point is, Africa will never be transformed with the kind of dictators we have today in this continent. So it's important you become aware of your environment. Your discussion groups should be talking about the moral high ground, not just about ethnicity, not just about employment. And I'll come back to employment later on. But it's important, if we're going to celebrate Africa Day, we have to think about Africa. We have to think about how the black race will again dominate through our history. America was not created when we had a civilization of Lalibela and Aksum in this country. America is 200 years old. But the point is, look where the United States is. It used African slaves to develop itself into an industrial hinterland. And it's very important to look into these stories so that we can manage to get to where we are and where we should be. What can we do about Africa Day? The most important thing we can do about Africa Day is to be messengers of peace. Take, for example, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Can anybody tell me what the wealth of the DRC is? Do you know what the wealth of the DRC is? The DRC minerals are worth $34 trillion. They're more than the economy of the United States. They're more than the economy of the combined European economy. They're more than the economy of China. But what's the problem we have? The problem we have is the lack of peace. DRC, with all its diamonds, gold, flora and fauna, it has one single dam that can potentially produce 54,000 megawatts of electricity, which can supply literally half of Africa. But DRC today is the highest concentration of United Nations peacekeeping forces. The problem is peace. How can we transform this into peace? Frankly, the last 4 years, we almost went like DRC in this country. Young people like you were burning factories, they were burning agricultural fields. And how do you develop a nation when people burn the instruments of production that they're using? So it's very important to look into how we design our advocacy. It's not just a question of killing and burning, but it's a question of peaceful transition, like Gandhi, who taught us peaceful transition. Mandela is another icon about peaceful transition. And we have many in Ethiopian history who have done this. Unfortunately, our leaders don't like it when Ethiopian history is written in its real form. The history we have is only history of kings, history of queens, and history of wars. We don't have the history of civil society in this country. But hopefully it will be written now. The challenges that we face as Ethiopia and as part of Africa today are economic, political. The challenges we face are social, and the challenges we face are financial. Ethiopia has an amazing development trajectory. We've built 74,000 kilometers of roads in no time. We have 50 public universities. We have 11 industrial parks. It goes on. But the point is, where is the human component of that development? Has this been transformed into livelihoods of ordinary citizens? As we know today, Ethiopia is the only country that receives food aid in peacetime. There is no other country in the world that receives food aid in peacetime. This should make us really sad. And the irony is that we have the highest number of agricultural land in Africa, 72 million hectares of land. Our rivers are called, Ethiopia is called the water tower of Northeast Africa. Our rivers gargles 122 billion cubic meters of water every year in 4 directions, in all directions. But we can't even grow the food we're eating. 2 years ago, our government bought wheat for $770 million to feed its own people. And these people are in Somali region, in Borana, in different parts of Ethiopia. And these are the most productive lands we have, with rivers flowing on them. You, as young people, should be talking about this. You should be thinking about this. Our corrupt bureaucracy is not helping even foreign investors to till the land and produce food. The most important thing at the end of the day is, what is the future of youth? The day before yesterday, I was graduating Ethiopian scouts who were trained by our foreign scout members for leadership positions, what we call a wood badge level, so that they can train other scouts. We have 100,000 scouts today, and we're aiming to go to 250,000 in the next 2 years in schools, in all schools in Ethiopia. And I think you, as university students, should join our program, what we call the Messengers of Peace. These young children are taught about citizenship, about their responsibilities, and about the privilege the Constitution gives them. And it's important that we look into these young students, the Cub Scouts, 6-year-old, 8-year-old kids who are now thinking about peace. And frankly, if you don't see war, you cannot appreciate peace. But our scouts, what we're planning to do is to show them videos of what Syria is, what Iraq is, what South Sudan is, what Somalia is. Then they can understand what the lack of peace means. And if they grow in peaceful environment, they will know to dialogue, they will know to negotiate. And as Johannes said, in a democracy, compromise is an important tool. So for us, this is an important thing for you. In terms of education, I teach public policy at the master's and PhD level at Addis Ababa University. And second-year students called me and they said, what is our future? What kind of a job are we going to find? We study economics, we study finance, but the graduates are not having jobs. What I told them is simple, and it's the following. Number one, you study a subject because you are interested in it. You want to know more about economics, you want to know more about sociology and anthropology, you want to be a medical doctor, a humanitarian job, you want to be a lawyer. This is your specific interest. What you do in life is different. As Skender was talking earlier, I have seen him in newspapers, Habesha Bira, Habesha Siminto, Habesha this, Habesha that, and I always wondered what he was going to do. But he raised billions to establish several companies in this country. This is the kind of innovation that you should be part of. You have to get together. 4 of our billionaires that he mentioned earlier cannot even read and write their names in Amharic. They were simple traders, but they have come to this position today. So education is not a venue for jobs, it's the venue for skills. It's the venue to transform oneself, to be a critical thinker, to be able to understand your environment and to be able to negotiate with your environment. So it's important that you start today of what you want to do when you graduate. Frankly, all of us started with different kinds of education, and we landed in different kinds of jobs and activities. And eventually, everybody is going to retire. When you retire, what are you going to do? To get this small retirement salary and live with it? It cannot even pay your condominium rent. It cannot pay your medical expense. So what you do is you have to think of developing yourself. In the United States, the greatest economy in the world, 9 out of 10 businesses go bust every year. The one business that succeeds is what makes the United States a great economy. And I think this is, you have to keep trying. I have friends, I can give you hundreds of examples of business friends that I have that have failed so many times, but when they succeeded eventually, they became the rulers of this country. You know who rules this country? It's the people with money. They go everywhere and they are accepted with respect. Governments, we change them when they are not good for us. But business entities, they are there for good. They leave legacy for the country and they leave resources for their children. So it's very important that you think about this. And I think you have to form circles around your youth friends and colleagues and look for opportunities on what you can do while you're very young. I see a lot of young people opening mobile shops, opening this kind of shops, clothes shops, and every kind of shops. I think you can even sell air in Ethiopia if you can put it in a bottle. But the point is, we haven't done so yet. You remember these plastic bottles for water? When they were introduced by Ermias Amelga, who is now in prison, that was a fantastic idea. Ermias was also an innovator. He created Zaman Bank, Access Capital, and everything. Something screwed up and they put him in jail. But the point is, today, every water you see is a plastic bottle that you drink from. He thought about it. When he saw the water flowing, he said, let me put this into water. It was difficult to sell in the beginning, but now it has become the mainstream. So it's very important that you talk about innovation. Innovation is what changed the world. The United States is great because it is an innovating society. Every Nobel Prize except peace and politics goes to universities in the United States because they have finance for research, they create, they innovate new economic ideas, new scientific ideas that brings the United States to where it is today. Thanks for his current president, everything might change, but the point is, as we become innovators, we can work very clearly. At the end, what I'd like to wish you a pleasant Africa Day, and I want you to read about Africa as much as possible, about the history of Africa, the history of slavery, the history of our colonization, the history of what the colonizers are doing this to us today. Do you know that the Francophone countries in Africa, none of them has a national bank or a central bank of their own. They still deposit their money in France. And France takes 15% out of everything they deposit to service that. They are still paying to France colonial debt. For being colonized, they're paying. And I think liberating Africa means we have to take Africans out of this. It's the youth like you who are going to help them to do this. And I think this is very important to connect also with the African youth, to create a network with the African youth. We had what you call, when we were kids, we had what you call pen pal friends. We used to write with friends in high school in the United States, in Europe, and of course these have become our friends today. Thanks to social media, we can meet easily today. But the point is, you need to think beyond your own environment, beyond your own cocoon. You got to get out of it and finally say, I'm an African. That's what unites us. Forget who you are ethnically. Ethnicity, Einstein said, is a measles of human beings. It's a measles of humanity. When we go down to that, we become DRC. We become Rwanda, like Hutu and Tutsi who've been killing each other. When we come to that degree, it's Central African Republic. The mineral-rich country, Central African Republic, produce what you call coltan, that is found in every mobile phone you have. Central African Republic today, the fight is between Muslims and Christians. This is what our former colonial powers and corporate giants do to us to continue to exploit this continent. Let's not fall into that trap. People want to come and govern you using different methods. But at the end of the day, what you know is you are an Ethiopian and you are an African at heart. And of course, a global citizen at that when it comes to peace and security. Thank you.